We want to thank you today. This webinar is brought to you by Youth Voice, from Youth Voice Program for Fostering Media Connections. It's titled Nowhere to Be, Youth Homelessness After Foster Care in New York. We will be specifically talking to panelists who come out of the New York foster care system, who have now transitioned and are doing wonderful things with their life, but they're here to share their experiences while being in the child welfare system, the things that happen to them after foster care, and what program officials and leaders could have done better to support them as they were transitioning out of the system. Thank you. So just a little bit about the Youth Voice program. My name is Raquel Wilson. For those who don't know, I am the proud Youth Voice program manager here at Fostering Media Connections. I'm actually getting ready to roll into my third year being with the organization. And since coming in, we have brought so many different educational workshops, different contests. We've created different internship and opportunities and just roles to help, provide not only compensation, but offer foster youth a safe platform to express their feelings about the child welfare system safely and honestly, as well as learn skills and actually be compensated for the work that they're doing in terms of rolling up their sleeves and actually, helping facilitate conversations that will drive systematic change. And we hoping that through these different webinars, these different conversations that we're having, the different opportunities that we provide our foster youth and program participants to write and share about their lived experiences, that we could, hopefully change the system. And so thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you so much for supporting the Youth Voice program. To stay informed about all of the great things that we're doing here today, please feel free to follow our newsletter. It goes out every month, and we put all of the information of all the great things that we're doing. And if you would like to also stay in tune with all of the other things that we're doing, we have social media outlets. So please feel free to follow our social media platforms, because that is definitely another way for you to stay up to date with all of the great things that we're doing over here and the advocacy work that we're doing to really, provide a platform for foster youth. And so at this time, you will see a quick survey pop up on your screen. And this is just for us to know, how did you hear about this webinar? How, how our events could be better. This would just make me, help me make me a better just program leader, because it lets me know how you guys are finding out about our information, what organizations and social, whether we're connecting with social workers and adoptive parents, if you heard about us from a previous event. And so this is just for us to just know how we can just do a better job at engaging other foster youth and finding more social workers, more DCFS partners, more community leaders, and just basically people who serve in entities that serve foster youth. We can find more people to connect with and, have these conversations and invite them to these conversations. Thank you. So we're just going to allow some time, a few seconds for some people to fill it out. And so please feel free to do so. It just really helps us. I see people introducing themselves in the chat, so please drop your information in the chat. Let us know where you're from, your name, what state you're representing, because that information is very vital to helping us facilitate and also connect our program participants to some of the great things that you're doing with your organization as well. All right, so the survey's results should be popping up soon. I see that we have a few foster parents. We have some social workers, which I really, really love. Attorneys that I really, really love. Folks that work with foster youth, which is really, really great. I'm seeing that you guys either attended previous events. I'm seeing our email blasts are definitely working and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so I'm very, very excited about that. So thank you all for participating in that. As stated before, it really just helps me know how of a great or bad job that I'm doing with engaging and finding folks to join in on these conversations and really drive these points home that our panelists are going to be speaking about soon. And so, yes, thank you again. All right. So now for the moment that you all been waiting for, and I'm so very, very happy and blessed to be in this space to be able to, specifically dedicate these type of open spaces to different states and different proximities that foster youth have participated in and lived in. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists. Our panelists are just going to wave their hands or unmute themselves and say hi. But I want to start off with Jeremiah Perez Torres, who is a former foster youth advocate. He volunteers his time with Hearts to Homes, an organization dedicated to helping youth who are aging out of the foster care system in New York City and the tri-state area. Outside of his advocacy work, Perez Torres is a graduate student who studies the impact of propaganda on the radicalization process of extremists, and an adjunct, and I get this word out, to his professor, John Jay College of Criminal Justice. You can find him on Twitter at J_Borkin. That's BORIKN. And Jeremiah, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Jeremiah definitely shows up and shows out when it comes to New York work and advocacy, always willing to participate. And I just love always just having that male perspective on board. So I appreciate you, Jeremiah, for always giving us your time and gracing us with your lived experience. And so next we have Trishan Ganji. I'm hoping I'm saying it correctly. Is currently a MSW student working for New Alternatives for Children as a transitional age coach. He obtained his master's from NYU and holds unique foster care experience as a former foster youth. He was recently featured on New York One New Yorker of the Week in April 2022 for his work. Ganji is also a published poet, and he has 2 cats. And so Trishan, thank you so much for being here. Trishan is one of my first program babies, literally from my first writing opportunity I did on COVID experience with foster youth. When I first started here at Foster Media Connections almost 3 years ago. So as you can tell, it's just literally about creating a space that is inviting. And I just really appreciate you, you both, Jeremiah and Tristan, showing up again and again. And so next I would love to introduce Niasia, I hope I'm saying it right, Kinsey. Niasia is one of our new babies, and it's so great to have you. She's a former foster youth, a current member of Summer Youth Council. She spent 7 to 8 years in the foster care system and is now a proud college student. She loves educating youth, especially those with similar experiences to her own. Kinsey believes that each and every day that we should wake up is a chance for us to be greater. And I definitely agree with that. So thank you so much. Welcome to the program. I'm happy to have you here. I'm sure this is going to be one of many conversations that you're going to be a part of. And so I'm just grateful for you blessing us with your energy and your vibes. And so last but certainly not least, we have Christina Abraham. And Christina was born and raised in East Harlem, New York. Christina is a founder of Girls Gathering of Independent Resources for Living Successfully, a nonprofit providing mentoring and leadership development for girls and young women in a safe space. The Girls Project is a collective effort of successful women developing effective solutions to empower our young women and girls who are impacted by the criminal justice system and reintegrating into society after being released from correctional facilities. Christina is currently on a hiatus from her studies at Brooklyn College, where she is an honor student. And so, Christina, thank you so much for being here and gracing us with your beautifulness and your energy. I'm so happy to get into the discussion and just you guys share with our panelists, our audience, about your lived experience. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. And so I want to go around the floor, go around the room, I'm sorry, and ask everyone to briefly share about your lived experience in the New York system, how that was growing up for you and being in the foster care system in New York. And I will start off with Christina.
Hello, everybody. As Raquel so nicely introduced me, I'm Christina Abraham. I have 18 years of lived experience inside of foster care, and it was a whirlwind. I will say to you that the resilience it takes to be a young person in care, I joined care when I was 2.5 years old. So I've grown up in care, spent the majority of my life there. And to be raised by some people who are not your parents, sometimes you're raised differently than one would hope their children to be raised. You don't get the extra guidance, you don't get a lot of how do I say it? Like I don't want to say love and care, but sometimes love and care. And as you grow up in an individual, especially as you hit your teen years, you're 13, 14, 15, it really starts to shape who you are. Oh, can everybody hear me? Okay. It really starts to shape who you are as an adult. And in that time period is where I feel like maybe foster care has the hardest time being there and showing up for our young adults and our youth that are aging out of care and transitioning into adulthood because of your foundations. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jay. I was recently featured in NBC News in the Today Show, and I did a segment about what it's like aging out of foster care and the challenges that are presented by doing that, whether it comes from securing your own housing to the emotional toll it takes to be so close to the end of something, but still so far you have to go until you can actually get there. And sometimes that little donut in front of the person on the treadmill is all it takes a lot of time to push somebody over the edge. You'll get so close, but the problems and the shortfalls that hold you back, that I'm sure myself and the other people on this panel can attest to, it can be a lot, especially as a young person who's grown up. Everybody got into care from some sort of trauma. So whatever they have gone through, now you're going through a system which is dollars over people, quantity over quality, and all of those things wrapped together can create a very tumultuous situation for a young adult who has already gone through, I'm sure, unfortunate circumstances. And yeah, that is my quick take on what it's like.
Well, I really, really appreciate you sharing and just to hear about all of the things that you are doing to now get out of the system and advocate for foster youth like ourselves. And we're going to get more into that. So I don't want to give too much away, but thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Jeremiah. And then Niaja, you can take it away right after Jeremiah.
Yeah, so the heart of my foster care experience was in high school. I had my case opened up when I was in middle school, but spent most of the time moving around, easily over 15 times throughout 4 years, throughout the 4 years of my high school life. And aging out was tough, figuring out next steps, feeling like all of the connections, if I had any, or the connections that I did have at my foster care agency was sort of snipped, right? And it was just like, oh, now you're off to fend for yourself. So that's that's one thing in particular that I've reflected a lot about. But I made it. I'm happy to be in this room, with the amazing talent in this room. I love to see all of your faces and fellow foster youth on the panel. So yeah, that's.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Oh, Niaja, you can unmute yourself, or Tristan, whichever one you guys go first.
I'm here. My name is Niaja Kinsey, and I'm a former foster youth. I was gonna say I served. Wow. Okay, I experienced 7 to 8 years foster care. It's not easy. I want to branch off of what Christina said, and my experience started in 8th to 9th grade. I'm one of 5 siblings, which was a lucky part. I still got to have, some sort of support system going throughout my time. But being the first one to go to college and the first one to get your families to believe in themselves, even if you already felt like, I believe in myself. If I get them to believe in themselves, I have all the support in the world. It never really works out that way. So you wind up, really relying on or just hoping and praying that, your foster parents can be, by your side. So I believe I went through about 8 to 9 homes, but, it's never really because we're a bad child or we should be given up on. It's because, we went through a bad experience, and a lot of times, a lot of foster parents, they watch. There are some that get scared and they feel like, I want to tread lightly because this isn't my child. But once we get that it isn't our child set into our minds, it's like this continuous wheel that just keeps turning, and we, often suffer from other foster children, and we do see the difference in how they're raised. We may get our allowance. Sometimes I didn't get my foster allowance, and we may have to go to Rainbows and get a $20 coat for the harsh New York City winter, while seeing, somebody else's child come downstairs and you're like, hey, mom, I just need like $500 for this $800 coat. So, and I've been there, so it's really tough. So, I want to say it does take a lot of strength for us, to just see this and still go to school, to see this. And I still, had to keep pushing my family, still had to be the first, So how I made it out was being excited to be the first. It started to be my thing. So, it's where I got a lot of my power from. It's where I got a lot of my energy from, and my praises in people outside of the home. So, even certain people who weren't even my case manager. So that will make me keep going, because as a kid, I got the attention that, a child needed or a young adult needed to keep going. In terms of homelessness, I was 20 years old, and a few days before my 21st birthday, my gift from the agency was, well, we know you went in as independent living, and we're authorized to find you a place to stay. We're going to let you know today, a few days before your birthday. We don't know how you're going to find a place to stay. Even though you are in college, we're not going to extend you an extra 3 years for a place to stay. We're going to just go ahead and discharge you. We're going to exit you out. So, I'm a heavy believer in God. And I didn't know what to do. I was distressed. And what happened was, my first day on the job, I was in the elevator and I was being walked out to the floor, retail, $13.50 an hour in New York City, no parents, trying to figure it out. And the email came in for NYCHA and it said, you've received your apartment. So, just to keep going, it's always been obviously what should be done. But I would like to say to all the foster parents here, I know there's a lot of foster parents here now. Shout out to you guys. I hope you guys are really taking some good things from here. All the foster youth here, that when it comes to living alone or dealing with mental health issues, you need a support system. And as much as you get upset at these people, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You have to have somebody to talk to, even if it is a therapist, just to get you through those days. Just take it one day at a time. It's really like the best I can say.
Wow, so beautiful. I felt like I was going to try to transition it over into Tristan, but I just literally have to stop because, just living in California, we share so many similarities. While I wish that 7 to 8, I don't wish that on anybody bouncing around. I actually experienced living in 33 different homes. And so, just to hear that we were on 2 different sides of the world, and we were experiencing similar things, it's just really sad, and that's why important conversations are like this, so that we can find community in our experiences and the things that we went through, and we can provide that same support to other people who are actually going through what we went through, and be the first, which is not a bad thing, but comes with a lot of trauma, as well, and a lot of weight on your shoulders. And so thank you so much for sharing that, and we're going to get more into educational support and mental health and trauma too as well. So I want to save some of that for our later in our conversation. So Tristan, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I just want to say I was completely taken back by how many people attending from all across the USA to hear us speak. So thank you for that. I entered foster care when I was 14. My experience, I want to say, was a very hyper independent one. Being the youth who, went to school, did the things he had to do, graduate on time, kind of left me a little bit shunned by my agency at the time because I wasn't one that they had to worry about. I remember an old social worker was like, when checking with me, saying, you're usually good, you're not one of the people I have to think about. I have other workers or other youth on my caseload that need, more attention, where it sounds like a good thing, but it's kind of like a backhanded compliment, because while I'm sure I was deemed, quote unquote, a success in the agency, I still needed the help. So when I entered Care 14, I lived in a group home for a year before finding, luckily, one foster family until aging out of foster care. But even my experience with a foster family was shaky. While I was grateful to have a stable roof, a stable living situation, I was being fed 3 meals a day, all the great things that come with that. there was still a disconnect of thoughts of, these aren't my family, feeling like an outsider at events or just an outsider in general. They did have their own biological children. And I, when speaking with them and re-engaging that relationship with them now as an adult, we had discussions about, how I felt like a second tier child and what things were done or what was observed that made me feel like that. Fast forward to 18, 19, I stayed in care due to financial hardships to afford college. I acquired my undergrad in social work from Plattsburgh SUNY School, as well as obtained my master's from NYU through the advanced standing program. That transition back to New York, because I went away to dorm for college, was a rough one because, I didn't really have a place to stay. And when talking with my friends about my acceptance, I did mention to them that my plan was to just start grad school in a homeless shelter. It sounds crazy thinking back about it and like saying it out loud. And I can see now why, my friends that did know about my situation, they mentioned to their family, I have a great friend who's having a rough time. And without me asking them for a place to stay, I had one of my friend's family reach out to me and say, hey, you're coming back to New York. We're not allowing you to stay in a homeless shelter. You're going to live with us until you get on your feet, which I was beyond grateful for. And I understand that not everyone has those situations. Now, fast forward, I'm 28. I'm currently working at New Alternatives for Children as a transitional age coach. What that means is that I work with those 21 to 26, helping them transition, out of the system, so to speak. And I'm very grateful for this current position. It was started as a grant position, which only 5 agencies in New York City were granted, my position being one of 5, to now, which it is being, pretty much the standard for most agencies, where we will be extending funds to 26. As shared, my experience with homelessness was when, moving back to the city and not really having a stable place to stay. Well, yes, I did have my friend's family. It was the same feelings of being an outsider. I'm a guest. I never felt like I had my own place until I moved into my own apartment. With my foster family, I felt like a guest, which I want to say counteracted with my hyper independence, because instead of asking for the help or the resources that I needed, I just took on more jobs, just took on more work so that I didn't have to ask for help, because no one was really offering that help to me. Besides my friend's family, who were the first people in my lives to, instead of asking what I need, just offering it and letting me decide what is I needed. And remembering that is kind of what I kind of do with my young adults today. If I see the weather's getting cold, I don't wait for them to ask me for a coat. I mention, hey, how's clothing? Or I mention to them what I think they might need before they come to me. Because I feel like if they're asking me before I mention it to them, then that's not what I'm doing properly in my position. Because if they've, maybe swallowed those feelings of, being a guest or, working up the courage to ask for help, I should be the one that's offering that help before they have to swallow their pride to ask for it. I would say that the experience of a foster youth can be a lonely one, because there are a certain emotional weight that we carry, even if you have the most perfect foster family or, reunify with your biological family, there is that traumatic experience of being taken from, or a fear of moving around again, or even positive achievements. Who is there to celebrate them with you? If you have a biological family that you no longer speak with, who's celebrating the success? Who's celebrating first job promotions, first, apartment keys, or just the regular come ups in life? And I wish that was something that someone told me, that the positive experiences may hurt more than the negative, because the negative you're expecting, you've lived through that, you'll survive it. It's the positive when you start to feel awkward, because you'll notice everyone else having, let's say, family supporting you, and you should have that, or you do have your little circle, but it's not the same. It's still a little off, in which not a lot of people would understand what's off about that, because yes, they support me, but they're not the ones who created me. They're not the ones that should be there. I'm grateful for those that are there, but the should aspect is the questionable part, where people should be there that aren't. In the chat, I'm also gonna share the NY1 article that I was pleasure to be interviewed about, which explains further my work at New Alternatives for Children in being a transitional age coach. And hopefully this new position title carries on to, agencies beyond New York State as well. Once again, thank you for having me here, and I'm willing and more than overjoyed to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much, Tristan, for saying that too, because please, you guys in the audience, and we are going to have a segment where I want to allow some of you all to ask some of the questions to our panelists. So please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will try to get to most of them soon. I really want to thank all of you guys for sharing your, briefly about your experience being in foster care. I know that sometimes can be re-traumatizing. Sometimes, often after these conversations, I actually have to take like a breath of fresh air and just like, mentally process everything, because, like we all have lived in different homes. I've never lived in a home with you guys, but I'm almost sure that we have, similarities in terms of the trauma that we experience and the mental health and the lack of support. And just hearing you, Tristan, talk about, your experience and not, the trauma of the positives, like it reminded me of like when I was getting my second master's degree and I'm at the graduation and it's like a moment where I should be like celebrating, and only one person showed up to like, help see me walk across the stage. And I felt defeated by that. And I actually didn't almost want to attend my graduation because it didn't feel like an accomplishment, And so, just hearing you talk about that kind of reiterated, like, all of them, those emotions. And that's why it's literally important for us to be having these conversations, because there is a foster youth right now that might be in this audience or might watch a recording of this, in the future. And, it's going to be really, really nice to hear about the experiences and how it's coming from us and what they can do to better themselves. And that's also coming from us as well. And so thank you all so much for briefly sharing. So I want to dive into a little bit more, especially in relations to our topic, while we're discussing homelessness after foster care. And the reason why I want to talk about this, because some of you guys expressed your, experiences about, dealing with foster care. And this idea actually came to me because I was having a conversation with someone, and I was talking to them about how I just kind of was kicked out the system literally the week before my 18th birthday. And I was actually getting ready to go to college. I got accepted to college. I had 2 weeks, and they literally told me I couldn't live in my home no more. I actually slept outside. And while I'm not proud to say, like, I had to like live homeless, like, actually, begging for food, like that was the worst like 2 weeks of my life. And then one of my friends actually ended up letting me come couch surf because, like you said, Tristan, I didn't like asking people for help because, I felt like every time you ask somebody for help, it came with a price. And so, it's just so powerful to hear you guys share about your experiences. And so I wanted to, talk more about homelessness and what your experience was like. Let's dive in a little bit more and get a little bit more in depth. And so Nyasia, you explained a little bit about, being told, although you were in college, that you couldn't, stay. What was that like for you? And could you speak briefly a little bit more about that experience? And then I'm going to pass it to the other panelists to go a little bit more in depth, like she did, and explain what your transition was like and how did you, how were you hit with homelessness after being in the system?
Okay. For me, I would never claim a story that isn't mine. So I can say I didn't even spend 2 weeks of being homeless. It was about a week, a few more days, 6 days until I received the email that I got my apartment. But I can tell you within that time, a little before that time, I have to backtrack just a little bit. I went through a little mental breakdown because I'm like 18 years old. You had the experience that was a few laws prior to me aging out. So that was the time where 18-year-olds, they aged out naturally at 18, like they just knew what to do. So for me, 21 I was blessed with. I was just sitting in the meeting, and I swear nobody told me anything. The foster parent didn't tell me a thing. I legit thought we were going for a regular 6-month checkup to check and see if I got my shots, and went to the dentist for the 6 months because I'm thinking I have time and I'm independent living. So when I get into the meeting, it's like I feel ambushed, and my mind is racing because I'm like, what is going on? We're getting dressed in the same home, me and the foster parent. We're walking past each other the whole time. Nobody ever said what was going to happen in the meeting. And I should have actually known better, because a lot of times what a lot of people will not say to you is the bribes that come with before you go into the foster agency with the foster parent. So I had actually took proof that she was locking up the kitchen and depriving us of food during certain hours. And she didn't know I had that. And from my mouth, but it had got back to her. So before we head over to me being discharged out of nowhere, she says, "Hey, do you want a new iPhone?" And I'm like, "No, I'm ready to get out of here. Like, I'm ready to get to another home is what I'm thinking." So I declined because I knew what it was. It was a bribe. So because I knew I was going to go up there, I was going to finally speak up for myself. All the women and the men and the case managers in the room were just like, "Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" And all of a sudden, nobody's mentioning my mom. Nobody's mentioning how I got here. Nobody's mentioning where I'm going, because they're too guilty to really admit what I'm facing, which is going to be no food, nowhere to go, a female in the streets, petite, about 109 pounds, so easy to be taken advantage of. They just discharged me and told me, "You need to find a job. You need to make it in New York City." I mean, I was just starting school. I was probably only a year into my associates. Who was going to hire me for enough money to even consider a roommate? So I'm just losing it, but I'm trying to stay afloat. And then I just remember, everything just being given back to me. And I promised myself that I wouldn't make any mistakes when it came to my apartment, which, that's for a later story. Things happen. But I just got on my grind for years. And to be honest, I was pretty stable on my own, doing it for myself. First person in my family to hit a certain money on the hour, like, hit salary. It's not just college, to get those benefits. So I can say that was my experience. It was very distasteful because they were ready to discard of me like old trash. It's just all I have to say.
I could listen to you talk all day, love. Like, I swear to Jesus. And we just literally share similar experiences. And so I'm definitely looking forward to having more conversation with you, just later on down the line. But thank you so much for being so insightful and just being open and honest about your experience. There are people here that serve and work in organizations and are claimed to be community leaders or are community leaders. Social workers are here in attendance, and they need to hear these things. They need to hear how their approach is, how we feel discarded. They need to hear that we already got to be, every time we move home from different homes, we're leaving with trash bags. And then essentially when you're kicked out the system, you are treated as one too as well. And that's just really unfortunate. So Christina, I definitely want to pass it over to you. Could you share more about church transition out? How did you almost have to deal with homelessness, or how was you faced with homelessness, and what that was like for you? And if this is the time for you, like Nyasia, to hold someone accountable, please feel free to do so. This is a safe space for you to do that.
So I would first like to say that as a foster kid, I'm extremely proud of you, Tristan and Raquel, for first of all, graduating high school and then getting a master's degree. Like, props to you guys. We already know how hard it is to even get past high school. I went to summer school for the first time in my life, senior year, because of what Nyasia was talking about earlier, about how it just eats up at you over time, how it's hard to go to school. So the first time in my life, I went senior year. So master's degree, double master's, like, you guys inspire me. And as one of you guys, great job. Like, you make us look good. But my experience with homelessness was kind of similar to Nyasia. It started when I was around 19, but it started because of college. COVID happened and nobody was looking for foster kids. Nobody was looking to take foster kids in. So I start college, fall semester 2019. 2020 comes, I'm dorming in Brooklyn College. Then the dorm shuts down. Nobody knows what college is going to look like going forward. Nobody knows what dorming is going to look like going forward. The dorm project, which is a huge thing for foster children, they shut down their locations. So it was basically nobody trying to accept the kids. So what did that leave me? That left me with no one. As we know, turnover of caseworkers is incredibly high in agencies. So whoever you talk to now, and then in COVID, if you could get a hold of somebody, they might not be here next week or next month or the month after that. when you have court dates might be every 4 months. So that's 4 times a year you see a judge that can actually order something to actually happen. But between those times, you're kind of on your own. So when I couldn't find anybody to talk to, what am I going to do? Like, I can't just not do anything. You find somewhere to go. You reach out to people, you know, you do like Tristan said, and you ask for help. Even though, you know, in my experience, you ask for help, let's say the 5 people around you, the 5 people closest to you. And those might be the people who don't do what you need them to do, who turn around and say no, who are the ones that don't do this. And then you're young, right? So when you're young, you don't get that gratification, that instant gratification, or, you know, that pat on the back showing that you're making the right moves. You stop asking for help. Because then you're like, what's the point in asking for help? All I'm doing is letting people know my shortfalls so they can look at me and say, oh, so sad. And then it's like nobody does anything. It's like everybody knows my situation is bad. Everybody knows my situation is so sad. But like Tristan said, nobody's giving me the help. Nobody's like, you know what? You're not in school. You have nowhere to be. Here's the place. Here's the this. Here's the resource. And I feel like that's something that needs to be done a lot more. Don't ask, just do, because everybody needs it, whether they say it or not. So just do it. And I was homeless. I was living in an abandoned apartment at the time. My grandfather's old apartment, unfortunately, had went into the hospital for organ failure. So his old abandoned apartment, he no longer used, had no electricity or anything, but it had a bed and it had a roof. So I was there. And so that's where I went. I didn't even have a front door key. I had to wait till somebody leave to come in. If it was late at night, I'm outside all night until I can get in at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And in the interim, you know, you let your caseworkers know, you let other people know. And what do? They give you a list of food pantries and shelters and tell you to figure it out. You are charged by the state of New York to house me, to care for me. And you give me a list of food pantries and shelters? How dare you? It's a slap in the face, especially as somebody who's 19 years old. Like, not to say that I was like 5, but I'm still not anywhere solidified or know what I'm doing or have a good head on my shoulders. Not like anybody in foster care was about to make sure that happened. So everything I amassed over that time period, as much of us have, was through your own trial and error. And then to be out on your own at 19, it was really hard. End of like around COVID time, I had ended up finally letting them know, like, hey, I need somewhere to be. And my grandfather's house had gotten robbed. So my laptop was stolen, all my clothes were gone, and I could no longer live there for safety purposes. This in turn impacted college, because how can you do online school, as we all know COVID went, if you don't have a laptop? Which then left me with the tuition. But it started a whole snowball of effects from this one thing. But from then, I now had nowhere to go. Even that safe haven I had found for myself was now, in my eyes, had been defiled. Somebody had came in there, snatched every small being, all my garbage bags that I had moved in my whole life. I had finally brought all my garbage bags into one place, brought all my stuff into one place. Because as foster kids, you know, if you know somebody, you might have your stuff at their house. If you don't, you have a little bit of what you brought with you your whole life. I've been in foster care for 18 years. So that's ever since I was 2.5 to when I was 21. I aged out last month. But ever since that time, I'm carrying little pieces of myself, and then for them to all be stolen. So a lot of mental aspects goes into homelessness as well. You don't know where you're going to be. You're already in a state of kind of like shock, right? You're always on guard. You're always anxious because you're used to dealing with people who are supposed to protect you, who don't. You're used to systems who are supposed to be there for you, that's not. So you're always on guard. You're always defensive. And then you kind of lose control over the thing that's supposed to be controlled, which is where you live. The one deal of foster care is like, if you're not going to do anything else for me, you give me like a room and board, sort of a hotel situation. I go here, I have this twin bed, and this is it. Like, I don't know if I'll be sharing a room with 1 or 5 people or what it will look like, but I have this. And for them to not fill even that end of the bargain, it hurts. It hurt me. And that's kind of where my journey of homelessness started. And right before my 21st birthday, similar to Naisha, they told me, and as like the interview showed, I didn't know where I was going to be living. I didn't know what was going to happen. You turn 21, you think you're going to get a drink, you're going to turn up, you're going to have fun. I'm over here like, am I going to be homeless? Am I going to be living in a group? Am I going to have to look at shelters? Like, think about that. As a 21-year-old, you're trying to start your life, but we're thinking about, are we going to have a place to lay our heads? Where are we going to get food? Do we have a job? my vital documents were messed up ever since a kid. So first of all, it was obtaining my documents to then get a job, because they tried to add my father to my birth certificate and they changed my birthday from June 1st to January 1st. Big discrepancy, which turned into big discrepancies going forward. But of course, all of those things add up, and now you're homeless. So it's like, what do you do with all of this? You do what we always do, which is just keep going forward. But what does that look like for you mentally, physically, how you interact with people? Your whole framework of the world has been tilted on its axis because of things that are out of your control. And yeah, that's what my journey of homelessness looked like. I finally got my apartment August 22nd of 2022. So, you know, I'm
Yes.
newly in there, putting everything together, making everything work. But I get home sometimes and I'm like, man, I don't know what home is. I've never experienced home. What does this feel like? And to come from homelessness to then everybody's like, oh, this is your house. You come home and it's like nobody's telling you to go in your room. I don't have to clean anything. This is my kitchen. Well, everything in this fridge is all for me. I don't have to not take something because this is for the grandkids or this is for somebody else. Thank you so much. But it's a crazy feeling, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, I just want to tell you, because I know you were passing out praises and graces, but Lord Jesus, you are doing the damn thing. And I'm going to say that word because that's what I want to say. Because this is a safe space and you are like, you know, I want to place a strong emphasis. You are doing your thing and all of you guys are in your own right. And I'm very proud to make the new connection with both of you two. And then the connection that I've already made with Jeremiah and Tristan, like, you know, I really just appreciate hearing these conversations. And so I want to allow time for Tristan and Jay to chime in and share about their homelessness transition. How did that impact you? What was that like? If you want to hold someone accountable for, you know, how that transition was, please feel free to do so. This is a safe space for you to do that. But this is a very empowering conversation. I know that some of this stuff can be re-traumatizing. Just hearing you guys speak, I'm like in the chat, like, dang, I went through this. Like, you know, I lived that, you know, and that's why, because it's somebody right now that we could be helping. And we could be, you know, basically using this conversation to shift their energy, to shift their way of thinking, to shift their way of light, you know, and almost kind of trains the trajectory of, you know, the path. Because I always like to talk about, like, you know, the road less traveled, but sometimes you just don't get to even choose your road. Like us foster, we're thrown onto a road, and then sometimes we got to jump in another car and get on another road, and then that end up we be out of somebody else's road. But I'm saying this all to say that you just got to keep, and it sounds so cliche, but we just got to keep fighting, and we got to just keep chucking through. But because there hasn't been forums created for us to actually have conversations about the truth, you know, because they want to keep us silent. They don't want to really talk about the things, because now it looks like we're bashing social workers or we're bashing foster parents, but really we're just trying to share our experiences, the trauma that we went through, the emotion that came behind it. And so you guys, y'all making me very proud. I'm gonna stop talking so you guys can just keep sharing all of the wonderful things that you have overcome and the great things that you're working on accomplishing. And so, yes, Jay, please feel free to unmute yourself. And then Tristan, right when Jay's finished, you can hop in to talk about your experience and how homelessness affected you after foster care.
Wow. I'm loving hearing everybody. I just want to hear. I should have came as a panel, an attendee. Christina ended, you know, one of the things she ended her comment on was legal documents. And this might be better, you know, talked about later, but I actually had a problem with my documents as well. My birth certificate and social security card were the same. So the issue wasn't on those documents, but all of my school information, all of my legal documents, sort of everything else that you need to essentially be a participant in society was completely different than my legal documents. So it was hell trying to even get my legal documents. So I experienced that. But at many points, you know, especially during high school and when I was applying for colleges, when I even learned college would be a possibility for me, I had to address a lot of discrepancies in paperwork. So that was a huge problem I had to deal with. And I think there needs to be space just to talk about what it means to be able to have your legal documentation, get it, ensure everything is in order, especially before you age out, because it wasn't done for me. and I was sort of left to fend for myself, as most of us are with many things in the foster care system. So I wanted to, touch on Christina's comment. And in my journey to homelessness, I would say, we're talking about transitioning out, and I do have a journey that ends there. But my journey started much more actually during my high school years, before I was 19, from the ages of 15 to 17 easily, right? I feel like with my agency, my experience, I was one of the few that fell through the cracks, right? My agency didn't check up on me. I moved around so much. I was staying with friends. I stayed in shelters. I also stayed in group homes, and that was probably the only connection. The group home that I stayed in was probably the only connection that I had to my agency. So my story and my journey of homelessness actually started while I was in high school. It didn't start when I was transitioning out. And I think, and that's really important to me or to know, because, when I was at 16, I actually worked with my lawyer because I was justice involved. And I had a wonderful lawyer who actually worked to get me an exemption to get on NYCHA's housing list. Now the turnaround is much quicker. There's still a wait for housing, and in some ways it's still a problem. But back then, I got put on the wait list at 16, right? And it took me, when I graduated college, the semester I graduated college, I was 22 years old. And that same spring semester of me graduating college, I had finally got my NYCHA email. So from 16, when my lawyer got me on the waiting list for housing to ensure that when I aged out at 18, I could hopefully have some housing, all the way till I turned 22, is when I actually got called, right? And this is with an exemption, a 0-level exemption at the time, and I think it's evolved. But at the time, that included people who were victims of domestic violence, people who were in foster youth involved, and one other category of kids. So I had a 0-level exemption. So in theory, I should have gotten priority. Yet that didn't work. That wasn't the reality for me, right? So that's why I say, my journey, not just because I actually was homeless while I was in foster care, and I was one of the few that got lost in the system. I also started my housing search when I was 16, and it didn't turn up anything until I was 22 years old, right? So that process was really long. When I graduated, when I got into college, because my grades were essentially crap and I couldn't apply to 4-year colleges, I had to start with a community college. I had a great community college experience. I think community college is great. I just want to add that in. So don't take my comments out of context, but I had to start off with community college. So when I started in community college, I was still homeless, staying in friends' houses, etc. And I was fortunate and privileged enough to get into a 4-year college in Buffalo. So I actually left New York City. And that came, when I left to Buffalo, that was attached with housing. So I was able to get housing. I was able to live on campus. And that was my first real housing situation, until I graduated and had to move back to New York City, and landed the NYCHA apartment when I graduated from Buffalo. So that was sort of my journey. So the whole time I was homeless, when I went to Buffalo, I was able to live in a dorm. I was facing issues of being kicked out during holiday breaks, and I had to work really hard to get a job, that gave me an exemption. There's very few student jobs that can give you an exemption to stay on campus. And I was able to secure a job. So I had that exemption to stay during holidays, which was great. I had a place to stay, but you're in an empty building. All your friends are away and you can't enjoy the holidays with family since you don't have it, right? That's a whole other conversation too, how you enjoy things. And I think that goes a lot to what Tristan was sharing earlier, the positives, right? The celebrations, and you as well, Raquel. But that's sort of how my journey to homelessness, or in homelessness, and then to homelessness, happened. And I finally got out of it when I graduated from my bachelor's, at 22 years old, and got my first NYCHA apartment. And since I had to move back to New York City for grad school, that's actually the same apartment I'm in now. And I'm in NYCHA, and I'm very proud to be in NYCHA. No shame, and I love it, and I'm grateful for what I have. So that's sort of my journey. I hope that answered the question.
perfectly answered the question. Thank you so much. Tristan, without further ado, I'm sorry I saw you menu yourself, but I have just wanted to have a nice brief transition into you. So yeah.
Thank you for all of you before me sharing your stories and experiences. I would definitely would say my experience with transitioning out of care and homelessness or the cusp of homelessness definitely began before 18. I remember, when thinking roughly around 16, I remember asking my foster family for money for books or something, or like 16, 17, 18, I was a freshman going into college. I was asking them for books and they expressed, oh, we can't just afford it at the moment, while seeing them spend money on other things for their biological youth. And that was like one of the first times like I vocalized my anger and what I wasn't receiving when I should have. It led into a big blowout. I left the house for the night and I remember thinking, okay, now what? Where am I going to go? I could call my social worker and stay at ACS for a night, or I'd go back with my tail between my legs and sleep in a bed. So I ended up going back home, or my foster family's whole house. They ended up never financially helping me for those books, which then turned to, me doing the unhealthy habits of, stealing money from them or stealing from them to acquire what was needed for my own individual life. And definitely strained the relationship with them. While they have things on their end to account for, there's also things on my end to account for while in survival mode. If I didn't have those books, I'm already setting myself up to fail. And I didn't want to be going away to college already being behind an 8 ball, so to speak. And then when I got to college, I quickly became friends with a fraternity and they became my surrogate family while dorming at SUNY Plattsburgh. So whenever my friends were going away for, spring break or winter break, I ended up staying at my fraternity house. And, I'm grateful that I've had experience, because while never really having that conversation with my foster family, I never was given um, the vibes of the room that, hey, you can come back here. So without me wanting to ask them and have that awkward situation, because I wasn't really emotionally prepared for a no at that age. So while prepping myself up for maybe a no, I just decided to use that hyper independence and find, a different place to stay. That continued throughout all of undergrad. Instead of coming home, I just stayed upstate with my fraternity brothers that stayed, got 2 jobs working around campus, on off campus. And it wasn't until I got accepted to NYU where I had to go back downstate to New York City. And I remember thinking like, great, I got into one of the top schools of the country, one of the top, programs. I feel like I deserve this. And then I'm remembering, okay, well, they don't really have a lot of dorming. I remember I applied for graduate housing. That was way more than I could afford. And then when sharing my situation with friends, that's when their family offered their space to share with me instead of me, asking that friend. But even with that transition of like understanding that like I could be homeless if not for the kindness of others. It wasn't the biological family members or the people that are supposed to show care, but it was the kindness of strangers or others who opened their homes and saw, the kind soul that was within me or my full potential, or that saw that, why have him struggle with grad school and, sleeping on the streets when we can make that experience better for this person. And I remember like even when thinking back to how aging out when I was working with my agency, a lot of agencies, they are hindered. All they can really help you do is apply for NYCHA, get you on a list, and then okay, their box is checked. But you're the one that's still waiting 2, 3, 4 years for this apartment. You're the one that's homeless. While yes, that worker is doing all they can, they still go home to a bed, they still go home to a roof. And even if they are the best worker and you did all you can do, now it's a waiting game. So unless you have that support, you're waiting. And while in NYU and living with this family, I actually was able to do my internship in a homeless shelter, which I think was one of the worst internship experiences I've ever had, just due to how the workers would talk about those clients who were homeless, maybe foster care experience, maybe not. And just thinking to myself, there's literally nothing separating me from these people, except the fact that I had support or I had a house to sleep in. Whereas, you're viewing these people as beneath you, whereas, I'm technically by definition homeless. And just seeing how those individuals were treated in a homeless shelter. And it was just one of biggest experiences for like, wow, like this could have been me, and how people would have viewed me despite all previous achievements, current achievements. I remember some people were expressed, I don't have these documents. And, when they were mentioning how like birth certificates and social security numbers, how all that takes time, usually the staff was mentioning like, oh, how'd you lose this piece of paper? How'd you misplace a document? When it's like, you're not being considerate to where these people came from, and maybe they never had it or no one showed them the way, especially, I'm sorry, I'm like time hopping around. My experience with transitioning out of care was a very unhealthy one. Being in college, I definitely did take towards the coping mechanisms of drinking, and just putting a band-aid over a lot of that emotional pain. I didn't walk at my undergrad graduation just because I don't want to. No one's really there besides my friends, which, I'll walk for them. Like I'll sit and watch them walk. I don't care. It was only me walking across the stage for my master's because of the family that I was staying with. They wanted to see me walk. And I even mentioned to them, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for you guys, because without you guys, who's to say I would have been able to walk across the stage? With all that being said, instead of also fostering the individual's empowerment, but having conversations of fostering relationships. Foster youth, some of us, I don't want to say we and overgeneralize, but we come from trust issues. When you come to the cognitive understanding that the parent that's supposed to love you your whole life, for whatever reasons, was unable to, or didn't have the resources to, or lack thereof wanting to, you have to depend on the relationships you make with other people to survive. And it's hard because how do you let those walls down to let the right ones in when you're questioning everybody from the jump? And being able to foster those positive relationships is what I really much attribute to how I became who I am today. Some would deem a success story, but, I'm just doing what any human is trying to do, go to work, got the degree, working, paying bills. And I don't see that as a success, but that's just normalcy. And the fact that only such a small percentage of us actually do accomplish college or an apartment or a house or a full-time job without a history of jail time or homelessness or a bunch of other negative statistics just shows how unnormal a foster care experience can be, because we're not the normal. We're not the normalcy of success. And I also even wonder, what would my experience been a person of color? I was grateful being a white male in this system, and I still struggled. So imagine those of color with less privilege going through a system without knowing how to utilize their privilege and utilize their voice for what they need to be done. I am grateful that I never experienced true homelessness, but I was always on the cusp of it. I couldn't imagine going through COVID and having my dorm shut down, because where was I going to go? Nowhere. Or having my fraternity house shut down, there's nowhere else for me to go. And, seeing now and being a part of, finding those resources for youth in my current position as a transitional age coach, it's just crazy to see how many of us experience the same problems, but yet no one really speaks about it, or you don't hear about it as often unless you're already incorporated in the system or working in the system. A lot of people talk about, pro-lifers and this and that, which is a completely different topic. But if you were so pro-life, then worry about those in the foster care system, or worry about those that are already alive before we're worrying about those that aren't. Because it's like sometimes a slap in the face. Okay, pro-life, you got that baby to be born, and then just because it's alive, now you don't care about it as much, or care about them more than, let's say, a homeless 16, 17, 18-year-old. With that being said, it's no secret the foster care system is a broken system. All systems have their cracks here and there. The biggest, and I think I saw one of the questions about what can be changed in practice, is, having these conversations before you're aged out, having these conversations when you're 16, 17. And as a youth, you should only be thinking about prom. You should be thinking about graduating. It should be the worker thinking about, okay, and then what? And then what? Even in today's climate, I've had conversations with young adults on my caseload who are almost 25, 26. And while they know that they could always go back to college, and I know that they have the capabilities of going back to college, do you want to attempt that without, let's say, a transitional age worker in your corner, and having those conversations of, it's not that you can or can't do it, but when, and the support that comes with it. So I guess that would be one of the things I would say in practice is just having these conversations sooner, getting on the list as soon as possible for NYCHA and other housing, having us as foster youth know what we're getting ourselves into when we turn 18, or exception to policy every 6 months, when we are talking about that stuff. This lack of knowledge of what we're really signing, we're not even signing ourselves up for. We didn't ask to be born, but unfortunately, we're in the system due to whatever situations. Let us know what's going to happen. We are old enough where we can have those serious conversations, because this is our life. And if the social worker, let's say, is not going to have those conversations, then what other positive adults may we have in our lives to have those conversations, if not ourselves?
I just have to snap my fingers, Tristan. Yes, because you was coming through with the word. And the chat is just really, I'm just so grateful for everybody who is communicating in the chat. Like, literally, that's what I want to see. Like, not us just having conversation here, but you guys having conversation in the chat and talking to each other and connecting with each other, because literally we all have resources that we could come together and, help out foster youth. But it's just that the competition within organizations and all of the different things that happen, it's just really, really good to see the community and the engagement. And so thank you all so much for chiming in. Tristan, you had talked about some of the things, better ways that you feel like that program leaders could show up for you and just show up for us in general. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. In you guys' space, how do you, I want to get candid. Like, if you were talking to your social worker, the judge, the program leader, the foster parent, what is it that you would tell them? What is the ways that they could have better supported your education, your employment, your mental health? Like, just even to give you that peace of mind to just of communication of, what, and as some of you guys mentioned, what are some of the ways that, program leaders and these folks could have had, better supported you so that you would have had a better transition into and out of the system? And any one of you guys can feel free. Like, everybody at this point, I'm just so overwhelmed with joy about how great this conversation is going that I'm just like looking at the time, like how much time we got left, so that, I can just be really good, like really good with making sure we get all the questions out and we get to the audience questions. But I'm loving this. I don't want you guys to stop. And so, yeah, let's keep, I saw Christina, I saw that you muted yourself, so I'm pass it to you.
Speaking candid is my favorite thing to do. And if I was speaking to caseworkers, it would be hard to speak to them because they're rarely ever there. But if I was speaking to them, I would say, you need to check in more than your deadlines. Just because you have a court appearance or just because there's a 6-month checkup, that doesn't mean you start busting down my door and contacting me. And now I have to do everything you want me to do within the next 24 hours because you have a deadline you held off until 24 hours before. Also, these kids, they're here and, you're in somebody's house. And as a caseworker, you are the next buffer to everything else that has to do with ACS. You are the front line. So unfortunately, that comes with some shortfalls, but that is the job. Anywhere else, nobody can fail on their job and it'd be okay, except here. You don't get a kid something, it's kind of like, well, the kid will get it next time. It's not a devastation as it should be when their rights are being violated. It's a humanitarian crisis that our tax-paying dollars are funding, and it's a problem. Supervisors, just like caseworkers, if they're there for long, you can work with some of them, and other one, it kind of just becomes like a revolving door. Sometimes they get so desensitized to issues because they've seen them so many times. I don't care how many times you've gone into a home and seen no food. The 75th time you go into a home and see no food needs to be the same amount of problem and surprise as it was the first time. No exceptions. ACS needs to do better with getting the information to the children. I know the foster care agencies are midway people, but it is their job to help us. Whoever you contract to do the thing in between, you still need to make sure they're doing the job. No kid knows how much money they're entitled to, what they deserve. Our rights are so like up in the air. You look it up online, you get like a 13 list thing that's like, oh yeah, a nice house, a place where you can live. But that really is nothing. Because when you go into a home with 5 people in one room and the freaking refrigerators are locked up on the weekends, and the grandkids that come over get special treats, but you have to pay for groceries and like senior hoodies, for example. Come on now. We need guidelines on those things too. Judges and lawyers, you cannot take it easy on this agency. They're not taking it easy on us. They don't care what we're doing. They don't care that we're crying at night. They don't care that we might be hungry. They don't care that we might be sexually or physically assaulted wherever we go. They're still going to do what they do. So lawyers and judges need to press way harder on the agency. These are children. These are your children. If your child was living like this, you would bring in arms. You would be in the front of every agency ready to shoot somebody. But because it's not your kid, it's way easier to just overlook them. Foster parents. Sorry, I'm like going down the list. Foster parents, you guys need to take accountability. You're being paid to do a job. Besides that, besides the payment, you should have the want to do it. But you are getting paid quite a lump sum. The least you can do is make sure people have the necessities. Books shouldn't be a problem if you're getting $2,000 a month. Pay the guy for the books. We are not your meal tickets. You shouldn't get a foster kid if you need extra money. You should get a foster kid because you have extra space and you have extra love. If we are your ends meet, if we are your means to an end, then you do not need to be a foster kid. I mean, a foster parent. And people need to take way more heed into who are foster parents. Are they emotionally intelligent? Are they smart enough to realize that these children have been victimized in multiple different ways, ways that I can't imagine, ways that they can't imagine, and being able to safely guide this child and take into account everything that they have gone through, because you must. Like, for example, a crazy thing that had to do with me. When I went into my dorm, I used to always leave, just always leave out my dorm, my dorm room, never said bye to my suite mates. I just thought it was normal. They pulled me to the side one day, like probably 2 weeks after I got there, and was like, "Do you not like us?" I'm like, "Why do you say that? I like you guys. You guys are fine." Like, when you leave, you never say goodbye. Wow. Slap me right in my face. I never had anybody say goodbye to. I'm leaving, sneaking out the door because, to be seen, to not be seen, and not be heard, that's best. If you're out of sight, out of mind, nobody can get mad at you for this. Nobody can get mad at you for that. You can maximize the longevity in your foster home. Because then when you switch foster homes, no matter if they're in the wrong or not, the child gets looked at like, what's the matter with you? You've been here, you've been there. What's you? So then you're like, all right, let me not have everybody look at me like I'm the bad guy, whether they know you or not. They're gonna look at whatever slip your number is on, whatever thing they wrote about you, whatever synopsis they tried to write about you, and people are gonna go based off of that. And so when you do that, it's just kind of like what do I do from there? Like, where do I go from there? It messes with a lot of things. All those people need to be held accountable. Other people that I probably can't even name, everybody in between, they all need to do better. And we as foster kids, we need to be offered a lot more mental health services. Like, everybody needs therapy. Everybody needs something, whether even if it's not therapy, if it's a painting class, something to have an outlet. Because as you go in this, it's outlets, it's pent up anger, it's a lot that goes on. And a lot of people need to be held accountable because it's not okay for what's happening. And there really is there's no justice. Like, what can we do? You leave out, your life has been turned upside down. Like, who do you go to? What do you sue them? Like what do you do? You kind of just have to pick up the pieces of your life and move on. Because once you age out of the agency, you're of the age that nobody cares that, you went through this as a kid. It's like everybody looks at you now like, you're grown, tough up. The world's coming at you. You got to do this. But it's like, man, the world's been coming at me since I've been born. The world's been coming at me since I came into care. I just want a breather. I just want to be able to feel like a normal human being. I want to be able to feel like I have time and I have space and I don't have to worry about problems that are way above my pay grade and actually shouldn't be my problems at all. I think that when I speak about that, I feel like I speak for a lot of kids. Like, not everybody. Some people do have wonderful experiences, but me myself, I've never been in a foster home where I felt cared for. And some foster parents need to realize it might take some time. That child is coming from their family into this new family that you have. It's going to take an adjustment. What do you look like to them? What has your roles been like in the family to them? And what role you may subconsciously or just flat out say you want them to fit. My first foster home was like, well, I want a daughter. I'm like, lady, this is the first time I've been here. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm not used to this. I need some time to get to know you as an individual before I walk around here calling you mom and calling your husband dad. all of these things just need to be taken into account. And I'll pass it on before I talk all day. But yeah.
Oh yeah, go. I saw you raise your hand, Naija. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing. I love that you went down the list, and you all can go down the list. For all I care, because for real, this information is vital. There's people in here right now that are serving foster youth, and they might need to change up their approach. They might need to change up the delivery. They might need to change up their language. They actually might need to start holding their colleagues and their counterparts accountable for the things that they're doing, because that's something else that needs to be talked about. One social worker of the bunch, could definitely, one bad social worker and a bunch of good social workers in 10 can make all 10 look like bad social workers. And so I love your insight and you sharing your experience. And so Naija, please feel free to chime in. And then Tristan, I see you with your hands up. You can jump in, and then we'll end this question with Jay.
I'm going to try to sum it up, because you guys know it's always so much that we deal with. So I do want to branch off real quick on what you said in terms of just them just being realistic and practical. So when it comes into like for me, right, I left my mom about 14, but this is after me, like I'm one of 5 siblings, but I was that one sibling that whatever my mom said, I did it. Listen. So whatever she did, I saw and I just soaked it up. So I can say in terms of, her telling me whether you go before a judge who knows exactly what any appointment, even if it's a dentist appointment, always show up dressed up, always make sure your early bird catches the worm. So when it came to getting things from the agency, aside from my apartment, I was always fine, but that's only because I got it myself. So I was up there dressed up as if I was this little lawyer who really, my caseworker is supposed to be coming to me, but I was just had it so stuck in my head, the system that my mom taught me. So I was always running there. Like I did ETV, filled out everything, applied to college before my caseworker helped me with it. She's like, okay, you should apply to NYCHA in housing. I said, I already did it. Okay, you should do this. I already did it. Because it's like, you guys are really late. I mean, you guys are going on 6 months, a year late. And that could be the difference between homelessness and a secure place to stay for someone. For me, I like to be blunt too. But where my trauma comes in is, I kept aspiring to be this professional because that's what I didn't see in my family. That's what I felt would separate me from my mom and what she did wrong. So when it came to speaking up in foster care, I can never do it without being seen as some mental patient or like I was having an outburst, and then for a bunch of different crap to follow that would lead me in the criminal justice system. So when it comes to like what I would say to definitely like bottom line, hands down, just fix a lot of stuff is, I believe I put it in the survey, a little debit card that's a Visa where their money comes straight to the foster kid. You don't have, you can be 8 years old and have a debit card. But these are things that, they're not telling our people, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like as long as the card where they can go use at the movies with their friend, they can go use at the laundromat. That's very important because I was in a foster home where I had to go stash tissue. Their kids would come in after me and go hide the toothpaste. Like, there would be no tissue there for me because it's all in everybody else's room. So everything was completely separate. From a $800 coat down to 99-cent toothpaste. Like I would have to buy it all. And the foster parent was stealing my money for like 6 months, but I didn't know any better. I thought, it was all included in the new iPhone or whatever that I was given. I thought the iPhone was so expensive and I let her lie to me. She confesses to the agency that she's stealing money from me for 6 months. And they all just look at me. All the case managers, they're just like, okay. I'm thinking, what? She just admitted to that? I'm going to get my money back? Never. I never did. They sent me back to another foster home. When it comes to mental health, there really has to be a lot that's done about it because people are labeled with this whole, you're crazy. And everybody suffers from mental health, if not once in their life. If you haven't already, you will. But we need to create safe nets for people so that they can be okay when they have these episodes, which is fine. Um, the caseworkers, they don't come in the house, they don't check on us, and it's just like whatever the foster parent says to make this child high risk to get more money on their check is enough for the case manager. They don't come in, they don't ask you what really did happen. They just, next thing you know, you're in the hospital or you're being sent to a certain area in the agency where now you're taking medicine, they're drawing blood to make sure your medicine is still up to count. Which is, just so disrespectful, because you just left there with your head spinning like, who's gonna help me? Like, there has to be some system in place. So that takes the foster kid from being traumatized from the home to being traumatized when it comes to police officers, when it comes to doctors and nurses, when it comes to lawyers and judges. So it just keeps going further. It's like you just don't believe anybody at a certain point. So, I just would want that for us, definitely when it comes to the mental health, because, these are all things that we really should be more serious about, more mindful about, especially even in the workplace. So it goes far. But tying it back to foster care, there's just so much. There's so much that Christina spoke on that I just had so much to say. It's just like flashbacks in my head. Man. I'm just going to pass it. I'm going to pass it along. I don't want to hold up time. I want to be mindful of everybody's space and time. I want to say thank you guys so much for providing me with the opportunity to speak.
We appreciate you and thank you. Yo, I'm sorry, Trishan. I just have to throw that in there. We appreciate you and thank you, love. And trust me, you're doing more for the space than we could ever do for you, my baby. So thank you. This is really good. And everybody is really happy about this conversation. So I appreciate you guys. I'll pass it over to Tristan.
I feel like there's a lot of things I could say to my foster care agency or my previous workers now that I am seeing the table from the opposite side, working with foster youth currently. If I was deemed quote unquote, a success story or what I kept hearing, yet they never wondered why I had to work so hard to be a success, why I was holding down jobs, why I was putting in the extra study hours, this and that. They never dug deeper than what was just on the surface. Like, okay, he's got food, he's got a house, check, done. Where is there emotional connection? Could I state things about my foster family that like a regular child would know about them and stuff like that? I like what Jay just posted in the chat about saying a success story is triggering to hear because, it's, what are we, a success or a failure? And if they're one of the two, then, what is the system doing? Also, thinking back to my time in care, when I was away at college, there was never a worker to visit me. My foster family, I think, came once to drop off my stuff the first initial time and then never came up ever again. Whereas as a social worker, and if you're involved in a younger person's life and involved in their schooling, you should know when Parents Weekend is or then this weekend's going off. And instead of, let's say asking, hey, do you want me to come up, mentioning, hey, Parents Weekend is coming up. I should have your address on file, or if you're dorming, I'm going to come by for the day. Actually showing that they care or doing things that a parent would normally do for a normal youth instead of being seen as like a client or on a caseload. In regards to what I would say to my own foster family or a foster family in general, it's that a lot of times I keep hearing foster families saying that the money that you're getting for housing these youth are going to electricity or bills or food. You had to pay that before we were in that household. So regardless of if we're spending maybe $25 more on electricity or maybe $100 more for food, how'd you survive without that paycheck or that check, so to speak? Because it shouldn't be seen as a paycheck. And some of that concern, when you're saying, oh, I can't provide you money for books or this, then where's that money going? Because there's no way one person spends X amount on electricity or food. And even if they are, you should have been knowing the financial responsibility of you're not just having the chance to take care of this extra person, you are taking care of this extra person. The same way you would find money for your own youth for X, Y, and Z expense, you should be finding for that youth as well. With all that being said, I love the concept of a debit card or just a way of maybe even the agency putting away this money until the youth is 18 years old so that when they are aged out, here's a bank account with X amount of money, like a startup kit, where some people, in a normal family dynamic, they do get a large sum when they turn 21 or a down payment for a house or a payment for a car. Maybe that's some way we can ensure that the money is going towards the youth instead of going towards the families that are taking care of the youth. But then also it's a multi-step problem, because then those families can say, well, we can't take care of that youth without this money. So there is a lot of things in the system that need to be changed, but it's so interwovenly broken that it's hard to change it all at once, because after one change then causes more problems. And I also would love to see in some agencies having just a full staff of former foster youth. Because even when working with coworkers and working in multiple different agencies since graduating college, the only ones that really understand what a youth is going through is someone who's done it. It's hard hoping to find those that care enough to read between the lines, or those that care enough to realize, okay, what's really going on here. Instead, as workers, we have to ask those questions, because a lot of times the children are being silenced or being quiet. They're feeling like their voice doesn't have a voice, where at the end of the day, they're the children in the situation. Whether you're the social worker or the foster parent, you're the adults. Act like it. You're the adult, not the child. You shouldn't be waiting for the child to ask for something. When they're a child, they don't know what they need. They don't know exactly what they want. You should be the adult remembering, okay, when I was that age, I needed X, Y, and Z. Or now looking back as an adult, when I was a child and I didn't have this, and that, maybe I should ask if they do. Now that the weather's getting cold, in my own caseload, I spend 5 minutes sending a text to everybody just asking if they have a winter coat. That little amount of effort that it doesn't even take a lot to do, that I don't even see everyone doing. Especially in today's world with technology, it takes 5 minutes to call somebody, or 5 seconds to send a text showing you at least, or trying to engage. Even if, for whatever reason you're doing it just for a check mark, at least you're showing, you're trying. And I think that's been a big lack of care, is that a lot of people, they do burn out, or they have big caseloads, but that spark of careness that made them go into the field dwindles over time for whatever reasons. And that could be also the agency not taking care of their staff and so forth. There's so many reasons to really zone in and summarize what the key reason is, because it's just a multi problematic system that, now that last generation's foster youth are old enough to replace these people, I would like to see the system getting better as we become more emotionally aware, more intellectual. Now with technology, even if your caseworker doesn't share anything with you, you could just Google some stuff, ETV, other aspects. One thing that I use constantly for resources is One Degree. I didn't even know about One Degree until working where I currently work. And if I had that 5 years ago when I was actually needing these resources, it would have been a complete game changer. But to cycle it all back, it's hard, because not one change is going to solve all these problems. And it really comes down to just empowering the individual, because as long as that foster youth or that individual understands that they can achieve a better future than their past, then once that flame is lit, then it's stopping these negative statistics. A lot of times when I work with the cohort who are transitional age coaches, we always ask, what's working, what's not working. And it really comes down to the individual, what they feel empowered they can do. One young person I was working with on the cusp of homelessness couldn't find a job in New York. And I mentioned to them, what if we just move and try a different state? So we started applying to things in California, other states, and he ended up finding a job with, room and board covered, everything. He went there for the summer. Within a month of this internship, he found a full-time job, a full apartment in California. And beknownst to him, I kind of had the feeling that, okay, he's not coming back to New York. When he finally had that courage, had that conversation with me to explain, hey, I'm staying in California, I mentioned, I saw this happening, but I'm happy for you, because now you can thrive, because in New York, it just wasn't happening. So sometimes, just the resources aren't there, and it's not even the individual and why they're experiencing issues. It could just be you need to start in a different environment.
Thank you, Tristan, for sharing. Oh, Lord, this is such a good conversation, but I want to make sure we can get to the audience questions. So, Jeremiah, I want to give you time to chime in and answer, but then I'm going to follow up with and sum everything up into one nice lump sum after everything is done. So, Jeremiah, please feel free to chime in.
Yes, I'm just gonna focus on one thing, and I'm loving everything I'm hearing. I'm literally taking notes, making webs, connecting all of our comments together. So I'm loving this. I want to focus on something, and then I guess it's a nice transition with Tristan just ending talking about resources. So what I think is extremely important on the foster care agency end is to increase their partnerships, right? I think more often than not, and I'm so grateful Raquel has started off the conversation trying to partner with people who are attending, and she's continuing that in chat as we've been going through this hour and a half. And not enough people do what Raquel is doing, right? In regards to partnerships. And I say why that's so important is because, I think more often than not, we think that there are no resources out there, yet there are a lot of resources out there, especially resources that cater to foster youth. But these foster care agencies are not putting their youth in contact with these resources, or the families in contact with these resources, right? And this includes resources while you're in foster care and resources as you're aging out. And I think that's one of the biggest things, right? You see, and I'm referring to my web right now. In Christina's comments, she had talked about foster care agencies, being a midway point. And as a midway point, I think that the structure of the agency really needs to focus on, resources, what resources are out there and what partnerships are out there. Because even caseworkers, even if an agency is partnering with an organization, and I've seen this with my work with foster youth now, or youth aging out of foster care system with Hearts to Homes, there's many caseworkers that don't even know that their agency partners with organizations to give their youth resources on XYZ topic, right? And it's ridiculous to me that, an agency went through all the work to get somebody else to give them money to support the foster youth that are in the agency, and then they're not even relaying that, right? So it's, to me, that's frustrating. So my one thing that I want to focus on this company, increase partnerships so that caseworkers, foster families, and foster youth know what's out there, and can take advantage of all those resources, right? And I'm going to throw out one resource now, which is Hearts to Homes, and the organization that I volunteer for. And everybody needs to know what Hearts to Homes is, youth aging out of foster care, because Hearts to Homes helps support furnished people's apartments, furnished foster youth apartments who are aging out and finding their own and get their first apartment. I was supported by Hearts to Homes, and then years later I came back to sort of help support the organization through a volunteer angle, right? So I just wanted to say that partnerships are key. Agencies need to create partnerships. The resources out there, there not being enough money is an excuse. Honestly, the money's out there. Even if that money comes through in partnerships, and the foster care agency doesn't need to pay it themselves. So that's my big point, and I think that's really important.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to thank all of you guys. We have one more question that I want to ask, and then I have time for one question from the chat that I wanted to make sure we got to. But if you had a question, our panelists are answering questions in the chat, so please feel free to drop them in there. And so to end on a lighter note, because I've stressed the importance of this conversation, why it is important to offer, better recommendations and practices to people who serve in foster youth. This conversation really was for us to teach and to provide community to us with lived experience. And so if there's one word of advice or one sentence of advice that you will have for a foster youth who've either transitioned out of the system already and still in limbo, trying to figure out, still in survival mode, as some of us have spoke about today, please feel free to unmute yourself and offer that advice to foster youth that might be listening and need some of that community encouragement. And I'll start with Christina.
I feel like each one teach one, and there is a community. Like it wasn't even until my segment aired on NBC, right? You think like I said, the 5 people right around you, you may think those, like, you reach out for help, you may think those are my go-to people, those are the people I see the most or I'm around the most, they'll be able to help me, and then they don't help you. So then you feel like, man, you know what, I should just do it myself. I can take care of it, because when you reach out, you may not get that help you wanted. I'm one of 10 daughters that my father has. And so I have 9 sisters. And it wasn't even until my news article aired that the 9th sister, who lives all the way in London, reached out to me and said, my whole life, she never knew I was in care. I have 8 sisters who live in America. who knew my situation my whole life and for basically didn't care. But it took me to reach out to that next one. She's the one that cared. And that really took an example to me. That really made me think, like, you know what? Even if I want to count out everybody, I can't count out everybody because there's still somebody. It might be the person right after the people I tried or the next person right before that, but there's somebody there. And I would say that to all my foster youth, like, definitely pour into our network. Like, we are here. Like, I'm speaking on the panel with my fellow youth. Like, this is amazing. I'm so proud of all of you guys. I'm like, I know we have a hard time feeling proud of ourselves because like as Tristan said, I mean, you were on NY1 and you just said that as if you just said you took your dog out to take a poop in the morning. Like, it's a big accomplishment. And I'm sure you're not feeling that. I don't feel being on the news. That's something that we go through, but making sure to feel proud of yourself because there is something to feel pride in for even coming this far. Like, there's so many people who haven't made it, so many people that are entangled into so many different injustice systems right now that we escaped from. So having pride in where you are, and with each one teach one, with the hotline. 2 people just learned today that there's a hotline. I didn't learn that until 2 months ago. Now I'm telling you, going forward, you could tell somebody else. The Justice Center, how many times would we have needed some justice in the Justice Center? I didn't know until I was 21. I was there since I was 2.5. And of course, doing work like we're doing right now, reaching back out and advocating and letting people know. Like, I saw somebody here from Good Shepherds. That was the first group home I went into. When I went into a group home, I went to Good Shepherds. So shout out to them. I saw we had a CASA advocate here. My judge, right before I aged out, she sent me a CASA advocate who I still talk to today. And now I sit on their youth board. So the things that we start out with, getting involved in them again and making sure to always advocate for ourselves, put our issues on Front Street, because nobody's going to truly understand. Like Tristan said, like Jay said, like, you need people who look like you. You need people who understand the struggle that you're going through. Because if you don't even understand, if you don't have any experience with foster youth, how are you going to know the little nuances and the little bureaucratic red tape that may come and stop us? You wouldn't. So that you wouldn't be helped. You would just be another bystander to an issue. So for everybody, just the advocation, just pouring into yourself, reaching out to the people around you, knowing that you're really not alone. And it might really seem that like that, but you're not. There's so many people going through the same things as you do. So many support groups, Hearts to Homes, like, oh, there's beautiful programs out there, and it shouldn't be all on our foster kids to find them. But if you do, stick with them, because a lot of them can build community, can make you feel better, and you can get some benefits out of that, like your whole house furnished, for example. But yes.
Oh, any one of you guys can feel free to unmute yourself. Nyasia, Tristan, Jay, did you want to chime in and provide some advice? Okay, I'll kick it over to Jay.
So just real quick, I think for foster youth and for parents, you know, who are working with, you know, who have foster youth, I think the biggest thing is to learn how to speak up for yourself, right? I think if you stay quiet, if you stay silent, that'll harm you so much more in the long run. And I think all of us would agree when we don't want us to suffer as long as we don't want you to suffer as long as we had, and we just don't want your suffering to continue. So really work on trying to be comfortable with speaking up for yourself. I think to me that's important, and that's what I tell, you know, every other youth who's been in foster care that I interact with. Really learn how to speak up for yourself. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert, extrovert, whatever. Learn how to do that, and that will help you out a lot in the long run. If people don't know what you're dealing with, you know, if people can't recognize, you know, your situation, if you can't speak up for yourself, it'll do more harm than good. So that's my one word or one thing of advice that I'd like to share.
Thank you.
I guess I would say to a younger foster youth or any foster youth is to always be honest, even if it shakes up everything, you know, because no one's going to tell your truth like you. As well as what's been mentioned earlier, you know, once you reach a certain age, no one cares about where you came from. No one cares what you've been through. No one cares that you're a foster youth. They're just going to look at you as you're an adult you have bills to pay, you have to feed yourself. They're not going to care of the story that made you struggle with what you're currently struggling with. You have to hold true to yourself and don't let your experiences become bitter. Be kind to yourself. Realize that, if you stop here, then all you will know is pain. But if you keep going, you're opening yourself up to something other than pain.
Is it my time? I cannot hear you, Raquel. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just went in and actually what Christina was saying about how there's always somebody who cares, and how we were talking about resources and fundings. Through ETV, I went and ran and turned my camera off. I got my little red scarf for Foster Care Awareness Month. And I got my, her name is Molly, and she's a little lady from Minnesota, as she put it. And I just read her note the other day to me, and it was like the most beautiful thing in the world. So I often, to be honest, give me 1 second. There was something in the chat that speaks to what I want to say. And she asked, I'm sorry if you have different pronouns. So it says, sorry. Okay. Well, it basically asks like something along the lines of, do we basically do we regret being taken away from our homes? And to be honest, I'm a person who believes everything happens on time. I am a spiritual person. So I pray, I say amen, because I was raised in a Christian family. It's a habit. But to be honest, I love the new skills I've developed as a public speaker. I love the success that I have. Being the first in my family came through foster care, and me just like being like, you know what, man, I got to make it because nobody else is going to do this for me. And to be honest, what a lot of people don't know about me is that I will hit the foster care button again, even though I went through some crap. But I also give it up to other people and what they go through, my other friends in New York City. And it's like, dang, it really is hard. And, I was able to finesse, and I was able to grow because I at least was able to bounce from home to home, at least, and get that 10 days notice. So I don't mind sharing, but my mom, she suffered from schizophrenia. My story was that, she called the police and for some reason thought that people were after us and said that. So the helicopters just circled the whole shelter. This was during a snowstorm. She took my siblings out during a snowstorm. It was like, hurry up, they're coming for us. And she left me because I wasn't putting my shoes on fast enough. And so my siblings came back with bruises from, I believe it was probably like, 2010, 2011 snowstorm New York City had. It was real bad. And I was able to go into foster care, go to school, just like meet new people. I would say my best thing about being in foster care and not having parents, I know it sounds strange to say that, is that I got to mold myself, and I still do every day, into whoever I want to be. So it's not always a sad story. It's just the things that we have to say, they're not nice. They don't sound good, and it hurts. But we do share a lot of happiness. It's just, oftentimes comes with select people after a period of time because of what we went through over whatever period of time.
And that was it's just so greatly put. And I just want to thank all of you guys. This probably has been one of my favorite, and I always say this after the end of a webinar, but this definitely has been one of my favorite conversations here today. I really appreciate the engagement in the chat, and just like how everybody was just so forthcoming with their experience, and just really locking in on truths, and explaining those truths, but turning those truths into positives, and so one thing that I definitely want to share before we move on as a thing of advice is that a lot of organizations, social work, serving entities, youth serving programs, we just really got to stop being in competition with each other and really come together. It's so much money, it's so many resources, it's so much opportunity that can be afforded to foster youth, especially those who have transitioned out of the system. And because we want to be selfish and keep our program participants to ourselves and keep our resources to ourselves. We don't want to share and build people up. And it's unfortunate. And so I hope that I was everything to you all that you all were to me. I created these type of, I really, locked and fought hard for us to be able to host webinars like these, to have these type of conversations, because not only does it build character, in healing from the experiences that we've had to deal with, but someone is outside in the world right now, and they're going to watch this, and they're going to be empowered by at least one of you guys, and that's literally all that I can think and ask for. And so I would like to say, if you like this event and you liked hearing from all of our panelists, please tell us how we did by responding to our survey that we're going to drop in the chat. It just lets us know, what we could be doing differently, what kind of conversations that you guys want to see had. If there's topics that you want us to, put on our list of topics that we're going to be diving into. I'm already putting together the 2023 list of webinar topics. Please feel free to fill this out, because it really helps and it supports us, and it helps tell us, what we could be doing better and how we could be better engaging and having conversations that, we deem are important. And also, our next webinar, I'm also going to be dropping that information into the chat. We're going to be talking to foster youth, very sensitive topic. We're going to be talking to foster youth with disabilities who will be sharing their experiences about living in the system, how they were treated because they had disabilities, offering better advice to youth serving organizations on how they can appropriately engage and foster better relationships with youth who have disabilities and better support them so that they also have an incredible, not incredible experience in foster care, because whose experience is incredible, but have a better experience in the foster care system. I also want to thank our panelists again. Thank you to all of our audience members. Shout out to Sarah in the background, who is always holding it down with our technical support. We compensate our youth everything that goes through this program. Every time a foster youth shows up, I want you to know that I'm paying for them. I'm paying it. I fought hard to make sure that we're not compensating $25, $50 for lived experience stories. I didn't hit the envelope margin for $350 in compensation. So if you guys want to continue to see webinars like this, where we compensate our youth, if you want to continue to read stories on the imprint under our youth voice column about the experiences that our foster youth participants and just foster youth in general go through, transition out of the system, dealing with juvenile justice, dealing with homelessness, please feel free to support our program, because I'm literally like between me, Sarah, and the rest of the foster immune connections, we like literally pulling it through, pushing through with what we have. But we know that we could be doing more, and we could be nationally touching and affecting more and having more impact on foster youth. And so I want to say thank you all again. Please fill out the post evaluation. Let us know how, if you enjoyed this conversation. If you didn't, please share with me what I could be doing better as a program leader, a webinar facilitator. Maybe you guys don't want to hear me talking as much, but I really, really want to just shout out our panelists today. I know this conversation couldn't have been easy. For some of us, it's going to be, some of us, it was re-traumatizing to, recall some of the experiences that we had. So I want you guys to walk away. Please take a break, go mentally, be prepared mentally, self-care, whatever it is needs you to do to get and find that balance and that serenity. I want you to do that. But with that, without further notice, you guys have an awesome, blessed day. Thank you so much for being here with us and attending this wonderful event. If you want to learn more about our program and all of our opportunities, please follow our newsletter. And if you would like to donate to see our panelists and our program participants continue to be compensated for their work, please feel free to donate at the link below too. Shout out to Sarah. Thank you so much for your help, and our special panelists and all of the people that were in the audience chiming in and engaging and writing messages. We really appreciate you. I really couldn't do these webinars if you guys didn't show up. And obviously I couldn't do these webinars if I didn't have incredible panelists like you all. So thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you, Trishan. Thank you, Naija. Thank you, Christina. I appreciate you guys. And I look forward to doing this again.